Okay, good
And
evening,
no, it's
everyone.
not. It's not started yet.
Oh, not started yet. Okay.
Nope. Yep. It's starting.
Mm.
Redirecting. All right. And you're on.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the Environment Subcommittee meeting. Um, let's see, first bill we're going to take up is HB 245. Where we left off last meeting was, we had an extensive discussion of the mining fee issue, and I asked if anyone had an amendment to please get it to the subcommittee. Didn't get any. Oh, hold on a second, Delegate Ruth. Didn't get any amendments. So I took the liberty of checking with MDE and accepting the last sort of compromise offer that they had made to the industry, which I don't think was accepted, but nonetheless, seemed like a reasonable offer. So in a second, I will ask Kristen to explain that and then ask if anyone wants to move it. But before that, we have three folks with their hands raised. Okay, so let me see let's see, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I spent some time looking at the spreadsheet and playing a little bit with the numbers, and I couldn't come up with an amendment that would really address my concerns. But I had decided that option 2 was the option that I can support, the $13,000 cap. I'm sorry, I didn't know we were going to move forward before subcommittee with an option, or I would have let you
Okay,
know.
that's no problem. I think what's been proposed is close to that. So, but then
The option 3, I'm sorry, Mr.
no,
Chair.
go ahead. Go ahead, Delegate.
Option 3 is worse in terms of my concerns, because the small mining companies are paying more, whereas the large ones are limited to only $7,000. So, my concern has been that these, these compromise options reduce the burden for the large mines, but they actually increase the burden for the small and medium-sized ones, not the very smallest ones, but the medium-sized ones. And so option 3 puts more per acre, so the medium-sized ones are paying more, but it limits the big players even more.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Delegate, let's see. Delegate Truss, did you have your hand up? No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I guess I want to know and I apologize. I apparently had too many bills in the last few days, but
Sorry.
I I guess I would like to see, I'm not comfortable with the $7,000 cap at all. And would personally prefer to see the $90 an acre with a $1,300 cap, the 13 cap.
Okay. Well, how about this? Kristen, can I ask you to present my amendment, which was in the reprint that was sent out?
Right, and so this
And
is
then
dealing with, so first, the service mining, modification fee. The amendment would change the per acre fee to $75 per acre, and it would establish a cap that increases from $10,000 in fiscal 2025, and it increases in $500 increments, ultimately up to $12,000 in fiscal 2029 and thereafter. And it makes similar changes to the renewal fee, along with setting a flat fee for operators with 5 acres or less of effective land at $120.
Mr. Chairman, can we bring that up? I'm just having trouble following it, just listening to it.
Sure.
Am I able to? I'm not sure if am I able to share on my end, or how does this work? Do you know, Margie?
You should. Oh, I'm muted. Hold on.
I guess I could just. Do you have the files?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the amendment so we can discuss it.
Okay. And I'll second that. Okay,
Second.
thank you. By the way, Delegate Morgan is in the queue. Margie.
He's out now.
All right, I think I got it up.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, sorry, Kristen.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
I actually don't know how to do that.
And that's not a problem. I actually didn't realize I had the capability because I thought it was turned off on Zoom for some reason, but,
Oh, okay, right.
so the down here on this is on bill page 37, line 31. This is dealing with the modification fee. The fee had been set at $12 per acre. The bill came in increasing that to 50. This amendment would increase that to $75. And here's the cap. You can see the phase in. It begins with a $10,000 cap in fiscal year 2025, increases to a 12,000 year cap by 2029, and then, you know, the outgoing years. In a similar way, the renewal fee is on page 39. And you can see the language basically after line 12, adding the flat fee at $120. And then those operators with 5 acres, with more than 5 acres of land, the fee would be set at $75 for each acre, with the cap starting at $10,000 and ultimately landing at a $12,000 cap in 2029.
Okay, and Delegate Ruth, before I call on you, I just want to confirm with actually Les, you were on the call, right? Or Gabby, if you could confirm that this is something that is okay with MDE.
Yes, and just for clarification, option 3 on that spreadsheet was what MTBMA had offered back as their initial offer. And during this week, we did talk with them and they agreed to increase that cap in option 3 to 7,500, which we were not comfortable with. So we are comfortable with this in lieu amendment. It's a little bit of what Delegate Morgan suggested, trying to meet in the middle. So we took our cap down a little bit from 13,000. We increased the per acre slightly. Again, kind of putting it in between options 2 and 3 and gave the phase in to give time for planning.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I am happy with this compromise. In fact, Delegate Terrassa and I had talked about a possible phase in. So thank you so much. This is good.
Okay, very good. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you. I apologize for being late, but I lost my key, so I had to go find somebody to open my door for me.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah. Oh well.
Glad you could make it.
We'll get there. So Les, please help me. I missed the first part of the introduction to come up with how you came up with or what the numbers are. I'm catching up on page 36. So are we asked, or Kristen, could you slide it back a little bit, please? So are we, okay, so there we are. So we're going from, we've increased the cost from 12 to 50 to 75. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that 75 is sort of the compromise between 65 and 90.
I believe so. I'll defer to.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then, okay, can you go down a little bit, Kristen, please?
Yep.
And then we have the caps. And we're looking at something between 13 and 7 to come up with 10. Is that correct?
Yes, we had talked, we were at 13 and it was 7.
Okay, and then is there, okay, so they're giving an escalation clause in there. Okay, got that part. Thank you. And then the 5 acres, the guy who has 5 acres or less is going to pay $75 regardless. So I guess the only question I got, I'm going to go along with this, but if you think about a mining pit, and I see a couple of them here and there, but let's say that the person's got 100 acres, but the 100 acres is not open the whole time. He may only have 10 acres open. Is that a fair statement, Les? With
Yes.
the other 90 to be future to be dug. But then we're going to charge him the full $95 for the whole 100 acres, even though he's only utilizing 10 at the present time. Have I got that right?
I believe
Yes.
so.
Okay.
I'm not sure I wasn't talking to myself. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
I'm checking. I
That
want to
becomes my
check
only
here to
question.
make sure.
So you're gonna pay, you're basically gonna pay for unused, you're paying for a whole bunch of unused land at the present time in order to collect in order for MDE to get the fees. Am I right?
So I believe, yes, that is correct. And that's, again, this is calculated in total to, based on the cost of us to administer the program.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for coming up with a compromise.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Delgin Morgan. Delgin Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Les, what does it mean by affected land?
So that's the land that's actually subject to being mined.
Okay, so someone could, under Delegate Morgan's example, if the
Or-
land, if the
Sorry,
land was not being used to be mined, would that be included in the affected land?
so it would be, and I'm sorry, I gotta take back what I just said. That's either land is being mined or has been mined, is in the process of being reclaimed.
Right, and so if for example, they had, let's use, let's say they had 100 acres and they were mining 50, the fee would apply to the 50. Is that
I believe
right?
that is correct. I will
Okay.
confirm that, but yes, that is my
Okay,
understanding.
but then if the next year they added 10 more acres of mine, then it would apply to 60. Like it could change, right?
Yes, it could change.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's what I thought.
Okay. Delgin Morgan.
So Les, if I'm hearing this right, you're not going to be charged for land that you have not used or are going to reclaim.
I think so. I'm gonna check and confirm that. I'm trying to
Thank
get a
you. Yeah, that
confirmation
just-
right
okay.
now, but
Let-
that's, I believe so.
Thank you.
Les, do you want us to put this to later in the tonight's agenda so you can check?
I'm getting a response now. So it is based on what the mining company wants covered under the permit. So affected land would be what the permit is explicitly covering.
Delgin Morgan, is that
Yeah, so
answer
by
your
that
question?
definition, like Delegate Foley said, if your mine is 100 acres, you're going to be charged for 100 acres regardless.
If that's what you're including under the permit, yes. You may have adjacent acreage, so that allows them to have an active grading permit or less. So many do keep additional acreage that's not mined under the permit. So not all of the land that may be part of that plot that might in the future be used for mining is necessarily covered by the permit at any one time.
So in that particular case, if a large landowner had 100 acres, he could apply for a permit for 50 acres, be charged for his 50 acres, and then as he subsequently wants to add land, he would apply for new permits to open up the extra land for his benefit.
Correct.
In that particular case, then, when we look at permitting processes and time moving forward, if the permit was granted for the first, I'll use my example again, 50 acres, and he comes back in 4 years and says, well, I want to do 10 more acres, how much change would there be in the MDE to approve the 10 versus saying, well, you should have done it all in the beginning?
In terms of adding acres,
Yeah, I mean, the permitting process at MDE isn't exactly simple, as you well know, from your days at Mako. So now you're on the other side of
Yes.
the tree to ask that question.
let me check on that. And
I'm sorry I'm making it so hard.
that's
It's
all right.
okay.
And that's this section where it's the dealing with the permit modifications, right? Permit may be modified, so it's in statute.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would be a permit modification. If you've already got some acres under permit, then that would be $200 for a permit modification.
Okay, gotcha.
And
Thank you.
then in addition, $75 for each additional acre of affected land. So you're gonna pay that 75 up to that cap,
For each
going,
of this, so if the guy has 10 more acres, he's gonna add $750.
yes, plus
To the fees already
$200
paid
for a
on-
Plus
permit
the 200.
modification, plus the $750 for the acreage.
So my sarcastic comment, will this cover all of MD's costs at the end of the day for the entire department?
So this will put us slightly under what we had originally projected in the bill, starting out and this is assuming a maximum return, which is not going to happen because, as we just went through the discussion, a smart mining owner will not put all of their potential acreage immediately under permit, but we would have kind of $120,000 less than our original proposal in the bill. That was the $50 per acre no cap. And probably end up, once it's fully phased in, with that $12,000 cap to about 16,000 less. And what this will allow us to do is train staff, update equipment such as seismographs, and continue to function. And again, this program runs a deficit in the general funds, and we're trying to get that off of the general fund.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, the amendment has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, amendment passes. So now we have this amendment plus the other MDE amendments, which we approved at the last meeting. So the bill
Move
is
the
amended.
bill as amended, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Second.
there's second. Okay, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, bill passes as amended. Thank you
We
for everyone's
accomplished.
work on this and MDE's work on this. Okay. HB 305. We started to discuss this last week. There had been some discussion about potential sponsor amendments. Kristen, could you let us know where we are?
Sure. So there's two components of the bill, and what was discussed last week was instead of having MDE established standards, it would require the Maryland Green Building Council to update or develop guidance for the purchase of outdoor lighting fixtures in consideration of recommendations regarding light pollution or color temperature published by the American Medical Association. One of the questions on that amendment is whether the Maryland Green Building Council could do that with existing resources, which they came back and said that they could. The second piece was restricting the use of state funds to install or replace permanent outdoor luminaires on the grounds of state buildings or facilities, to include parks, trails, and highways. It would further require, if state funds are used, luminaires added to state buildings, facilities, parks, trails, and highways must have a
I'm sorry,
correlate.
Kristen, can you wait for a second? Michelle, can you mute yourself? Because I'm having a hard time hearing Kristen. Thank you. Sorry, Kristen, please
No
go ahead.
problem.
Can you bring
on
this up? It's just hard to follow again, like.
So it's hard for, I can, but I have my notes on my screen. So can I get through
Okay,
this and then I'll bring it up?
Sure.
Okay. And so the second piece is the restrictions on the use of state funds to purchase luminaires. And the end piece I was saying is that it's adding a new restriction that if state funds are used, luminaires would have to have a correlated light temperature that is less than or equal to 3,000 Kelvin. And so State Highways has expressed some issues with the bill, indicating that these types of standards don't necessarily apply to highway lighting. At last check, the sponsor reached out and said that they were working on amendments, hoping to address the State Highways concerns. I'm not sure if what will happen. I haven't seen the amendment yet. And so we don't have an amendment on that piece. Now, with that, I can bring up the bill, if it would be easier to look at the provisions that we do have, but we don't have all of the sponsor amendments yet.
Yeah, so we can't do anything with the bill tonight, but, we would need to see any amendments the sponsor submits, next week, but would anyone like to look at the bill as it currently exists? With Delga Traza?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. If we're not voting on it today, I'm happy to look at it off myself with whatever we get sent. I don't need
Okay.
to talk about it today.
Delga Guyton, that's a thumbs up. Okay, all right. Okay, so to be continued. HB 655. Kristen, could you?
Yeah, and this one I'll try to bring up. So I sent out an updated reprint on this bill. Let me hold on. Okay. You see that clearly? Mine came up kind of weird with like a picture in picture. So
Yes.
Yeah.
okay, so this bill prohibits with this amendment here prohibits MDE from using a waiver from the general requirement to use non-structural shoreline stabilization methods when protecting property from erosion solely on the basis of replacing an existing structural shoreline stabilization measure with the same or similar type of structural shoreline measure. But unless it's in an area that is designated by department mapping as appropriate for structural shoreline stabilization measures. The bill also, the amendment also takes out the reference to grant funding. It's not intended to establish a grant program. So this would allow, or it's clarifying that the Tidal Wetlands Compensation Fund can be used for programs that incentivize the replacement of structural shoreline stabilization with non-structural measures.
Okay, and can I ask MDE, my understanding is with these amendments, the fiscal note goes away. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Jeremy Baker with MDE, and that's correct.
Okay. Would anyone like clarification on this? Delga Love, all right, couple folks have their hands up.
Yes,
Okay.
I would love some clarification. And if somebody can also just let us know if we've gotten rid of any opposition through this or where we are with that. Thank you.
Yeah, my hand's raised for clarification, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Jeremy, could I call on you to, I could explain it as the sponsor, but from the agency point of view, could I ask you to provide the clarification?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Delegate Love, your question was whether this takes care of opposition?
It was both clarification of what we're doing and what these amendments have done, and then do the amendments take care of any opposition?
Gotcha. So the amendments don't actually change the intent of the bill. They just sort of make clear what it is we're doing. So currently there's a presumption that if you have a seawall, then you should automatically be granted a waiver to get another seawall. Now, the department has maps where seawalls are necessary and where seawalls are not necessary. And where they're not necessary, you can do a living shoreline. So we're taking away that automatic presumption if you have a seawall in an area where you could have a living shoreline. And the original language was a little bit more confusing, and the sponsors and CBF and MDE worked together to clarify. And then the second amendment just removes the reference to grant funding because there was a component of the fiscal note that DLS had put in that said, this doesn't require MDE to stand up a grant program, but they could. And if they did, it would require two positions, a grant administrator and an administrative assistant. And that would come with a fiscal cost of at least $100,000. MDE already has the programs in place to fund these projects. And we don't need to stand up a new grant program. So we're just going to use our existing resources and try to get rid of that 100,000 plus in the fiscal note.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And then in terms of opposition, Delegate Stein, do you mind if I kick it back to you? I'm not sure if there was any opposition to this bill.
I don't believe there was. There was a suggestion from the marine contractors that in the event that, let's see, an application for a waiver from the living shoreline requirements denied, that funding under the non-structure, let's see, the fund under the Tidal Wetlands Compensation Fund would provide funding for the difference in cost. So that amendment, is not in the bill. And Delegate Morgan, I know you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you guys all get the information that Melinda passed out earlier this afternoon?
Yes, I mean, I know I got it.
Okay, so put it this way, this bill has lit up the rural counties. And without Delegate Otto here, there's tremendous trepidation towards what this bill intends to do and how it's going to be interpreted. And I'm just going to use my 550 miles of waterfront to sort of put it in perspective. So there's a word called fetch in this discussion, and fetch is the area from where you stand on land to where you see land on the other side. So if I use my house, for example, my fetch from my house to Dorchester County is 15 miles. So obviously, under MDE's rules, I would not be required to have a living shoreline. When you look at the VIMS map, and believe me, guys, I've done a lot of homework, more than I probably expected to do on something I'm learning to understand. The tremendous trepidation on this bill is the MDE perspective that everything should probably be a living shoreline, and they can arbitrarily decide when there's going to be an exception. Now, in the information I have, you guys understand that, and I'm going to ask for a hold on this, Mr. Chair, only because Otto's not here. And if you look at the Eastern Shore
Sure,
between
that's fine.
Somerset and Dorchester, there's 2,000 miles of shoreline.
Sure.
You have a problem. And there's a lot of overburdened, underserved communities in this map. And there's watermen, there's underprivileged, underserved. These guys don't make a lot of money, but they've lived on the water their entire life. And as things come to them, all of a sudden they're saying, well, now your water's going away. And the picture I've showed is up on the Wicomico River where, there's 12, 14-foot bluffs along the way. And they're saying, well, you really need to have a living shoreline. Well, the fetch is 9 miles. Anybody who lives near the water knows wind picks up a lot of speed at 9 miles and causes that to decline. The cost to do that and what they're asking for is tremendous. And I provide for you guys in your packages 2 examples of a living shoreline project in St. Mary's County with the estimates have been provided to us through the county, through the CIP process. So it's very transparent. It shows you how many linear feet you're putting in, how much it's going to cost. It's over $1,000 a foot. So those are just numbers. I'm just not trying to make it up and blow smoke at you. However, when I start talking to the water people and things like this in these overburdened communities, this one example I gave you earlier was they want to put in a revetment. And these are those pictures that you see in your package. And the revetment, now I'm all confused. So I find all my pages in this pile of stuff. The cost to put in a revetment system, which MDE will not approve, is $542,000. However, if we do what MDE wants to do, the cost to put in a segmented breakwater design is $2.8 million. Now, that's a lot of money to most people. I mean, maybe not to others, but that's a lot of money, and it costs a lot of money. And when we look at this thing, and then we go back to the formula that was in your package, how do you score, MDE, how do you score whether you're going to have revetment or living shoreline? And the illustration I just gave you, you have to have a living shoreline. and they're still waiting on a permit while they're battling that with MDE. Quarter mile down the river, MDE says you don't need to put in a living shoreline, and the permit was approved in a couple of weeks. So on the most recent email I sent you, there's a scoring process. And I think we heard Les earlier say today, we want to be transparent. That was earlier during testimony on the floor. It says here, the score is one way the waiver worksheet is used, but MDE looks at parameters individually to also determine if there are site conditions that make a living shoreline not practicable, as the scoring looks at the site holistically and there are certain conditions, blah, blah, blah. However, with the scoring is not shared with the public. So if you're a contractor and you're a homeowner looking to put in a living shoreline or a revetment, there's an arbitrary scoring system that's out there that the public is not supposed to be able to see. So please explain to me where transparency is in that. And I know for most of you guys up there, I know where I sit on this thing, but I'm trying to deal with all the waterfront people in the rurals. That's why I'm sorry Otto's not here today. But I don't think that sometimes when you guys have heard the story, and I respect everything you've heard in the past, because I'm just a little freshman here. I get that part. But I'm still trying to get through protecting the landowners and things like this from what appears to be a really hard position that MDE's taken. And I think that Weems has described it amply in his letter to you guys over the fact that they're the guys that got to do this stuff. They're the guys that got to go through the permitting process, etc. So I've rambled on long enough. I think you all get my point right now.
No, that's fine, Delegate. I mean, I don't think any of the advocates are on the call. So Jeremy, could I ask you again to explain sort of how MDE, what MDE does on the living shoreline versus structural shoreline, and the relatively small change that this bill would make?
Yes, and thank you, Delegate Morgan. I think you really did a good job of explaining, a lot of how this process works. I will say I did miss a little bit of it because my computer was frozen, so I'm sorry if I didn't, if I can't respond in total to what you were said. But I know the bill's being held, so we'd be happy to continue this conversation. I would say that MDE does have a process. I'm not sure that I would agree that it's arbitrary. We do have a scoring system that varies greatly based on the, the ecological and biological conditions of each individual site. What I would say this bill does is gets rid of a narrow issue in this whole process, is that there is a presumption that if you currently have a seawall, that you should have another seawall. And that is all that this bill does, is remove that presumption in places where living shorelines are appropriate. Now, all of the other considerations and the rest of the scoring process would still remain intact. It's just that we can actually engage in that process to see if a living shoreline is appropriate, as opposed to a hardened shoreline. And Delegate, I have notes with the exact same project, the exact same numbers that you cited. So living shorelines can be more expensive. How much more expensive does definitely vary from project to project. And all of that is taken into consideration by MDE. We're just looking to engage in the process of being able to identify if living shorelines are possible in places where there currently are hardened shorelines. And our maps tell us that it might be possible to have a living shoreline.
And I understand that. But like I said, if you go back to the VIMS map, and I went back, I looked at all of the shorelines. And on the major rivers, and I represent the Potomac, the Patuxent, and the Bay. All those are excluded, but any creek or tributary that offshoots from them is under consideration. And as you know, when you look at some of the spots, when you look from point A to point B, and I'm looking at my map now, my district, you can have 8 or 10 miles on the fetch from A to B, and you're saying, well, that's good for a living shoreline. Well, when a storm comes up the bay, off the bay, or up the river and things like that, it wipes that stuff out. And I've watched living shorelines come up St. Mary's City. I mean, that living shoreline, it looked really good. And that big storm we just had a little while ago knocked out half of it. And you're asking for a heck of a lot of money. And I mean, that was the state paying for that one. But you're asking for individual homeowners. And if you say it's $1,000 a foot, that's my number, just using what St. Mary's County used. It's 100 feet times 1,000. How's a homeowner supposed to get that money? And if you're in an underserved and underprivileged community, I mean, those boys are on the water. We heard the oyster. How much you make? You make $35,000 a year. How are they supposed to have a living shoreline They can't afford that. They're barely trying to get through the revetment process. And then they come up and you say, well, you're gonna have to pay $35,000, $40,000 for it. They don't make that much money in a year. Sorry, I'm being emotional.
That's okay. That's all right. All right, we're going to hold this bill further
Thank you, sir.
discussion. That's all right. I will also say that I sent out information that the Chesapeake Bay Trust, I mean, I realize, you know, the information that you provide in that one particular case, I'm sure is accurate, Delegate Morgan. Chesapeake Bay Trust sent out information about averages for living shorelines that they have funded. So,
I was on the Bay Trust for 5 years, so I really respect Jen and her opinions and what she has to say.
yeah. Okay. All right. We will hold this bill pending further discussion. And let's see, the next bill is House Bill 841, Delegate Ruth's bill. So, Kristen, could you explain what this bill does and if there are any amendments, which I believe there are some sponsor amendments?
Correct. So the bill is requiring that a water bottle filling station or a combined water bottle filling station and drinking fountain be installed in all new construction, for which a drinking fountain is required under the current version of the International Plumbing Code or state or local law or regulation. It also requires the department to conduct a related survey on water bottle use by units of state government and in institutions of higher education, and identify alternative methods for providing drinking water. We received amendments that one took a definition out of plastic water bottle. I took it out of the bill, and it's requiring the Maryland Department of Labor to adopt the implementing regulations rather than the Department of the Environment.
Okay, would anyone like to see the reprint? Well, Delegate Foley.
Oh, I can bring it up.
Okay.
But yes, I'd like to see the reprint, but I have a question for Delegate Ruth. And maybe you said this during the hearing, but I forgot. Did DLL sign off on this?
DLL is fine with it.
Okay.
I mean, they're,
And if
they're
you'd
not
like me to
taking a
scroll down
position.
the
But also there was
reprint,
one
just let me
additional
know when.
amendment that just added the word white, like soda. I can't see it. There.
can't
now I
see it?
Can you
Now
see
I
it now, Delegate Ruth?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's all the way down.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to scroll down through it?
Sure. Why don't you do that? And I know.
Okay. So you can see the amendment was to take the definition of plastic bottle out of the bill. And then in down, so we're on page 2, line 23. It's adding that it's the Maryland Department of Labor who's adopting the implementing regulations. And then I think there's a technical amendment down in line 28, ensuring that just clarifying that these are the data is on plastic water bottles that are purchased.
Okay, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I love the bill. I think it's an important bill. I want to vote for the bill. I do have a question about some advocates who came to me asking that we ensure that the drinking fountain has a lead filter in it, because so many of our schools, I know, as you know, as everyone knows, but I know Delegate Ruth knows, now have to have the big drinking water machines with the big bottle of water on top, because the lead that's actually coming through the water fountains for some of our schools does have it does have lead, does have other contaminants. So I wondered if you would consider that, if you and if you'd be willing to adopt that as an amendment.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm perfectly fine with that. The only thing I don't know is if there's a cost differential on those.
I hate to do this to my dear friend who's doing such great work. If it's possible to hold this, I will put that amendment in and also find out about the cost for next time.
Okay, we can hold this. I mean, one point I want to make is that the bill applies to new construction. So presumably new construction schools that are newly built have addressed the lead issue. But I don't know for sure. So we'll
Mhm.
hold this bill for,
You know what? I don't want to hold Delegate Ruth's bill if everyone is comfortable that that's accurate, that clean water is absolutely going into the new buildings. If everyone's comfortable that that's the case, I don't feel like I need to hold this bill. I didn't know if there was a retrofit provision or anything like that in the bill, honestly.
New
It's
construction.
only for new construction, okay.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
let's stay-
I'm gonna
okay,
let it
well,
move ahead if, unless somebody else wants to have that
okay,
conversation.
we do have, let's see, Delegate Morgan, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Ruth, what is new construction defined as?
That's up at the top, I guess. I don't know if there's actually.
I
a
don't think there's a definition. The bill does apply prospectively and the Department of Labor has to adopt implementing regulations. So, you know, it would, I think, conceivably be construction that's after the adoption of the regulations, but there is not a definition in the bill.
So let me ask the stupid question. Does a new home or a condominium or an
No.
apartment complex have to have one of these things? Because that's all new construction by the definition you're asking for. I believe that's new construction. If I'm
This is
wrong,
applying, this is
There-
applying, oh, I'm sorry for talking, over you. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's
That's okay.
just to clarify that this is applying to buildings that are requiring drinking fountains to be installed. So that wouldn't really be your residential, types
so
of
it's a
construction.
its specificity is that it's some sort of a commercial building, an office building, a school, etc.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Delegate Ruth?
Thank you. Yes, so it is very precisely defined. I don't have that in front of me, but the International Plumbing Code defines what buildings are required to have a water fountain, and like it's generally like per 1,000 people of occupancy, it's required to have one water fountain for every 1,000 people for this type of building. So I think many of them are commercial. I think schools are also included. But so it's only new construction, which is already required to have a water fountain. So it requires a water bottle refill station. Basically, whenever there's a new water fountain, you can purchase water fountains that have the water bottle refill station already integrated into them. So there's no like additional, you can install a separate one, or you could just purchase the water fountain that already has it in there. And it does apply prospectively, and I believe it does not apply to anything already under contract.
Okay, so I guess then, thank you, Chris. The only thing I would ask is that the specificity, using Mr. Delegate Holmes's words, are specifically stated that what you're asking for, and I can read the current law. I can see that. Thank you, Chris. And it just make sure that people know that any new, I will call commercial construction, that's probably more of a broad term, has to have these things. I think they're great to have, honestly. And we all walk with our water bottles, you know, we don't use a whole cut of cups and things like that. Not a whole lot of guys in the commission are using plastic water bottles. That's good. So that's the only thing I would ask for. If that's possible. And Kristen, you think it has not been covered or it is covered, I'm going to defer to you.
Kristen, do you?
You said
you think-
defer to me, but I didn't hear the question.
My
Well-
question is the state planning code. I just want to be specific that if it's a commercial building, if it's a school, you know, a gymnasium, whatever, I don't care. I just don't want to have somebody come back later and say, well, you weren't specific as to where that thing should go at the end of the day. I think I agree with Delegate Ruth. If it's 1,000, it's like a parking spot. You know, you got so many parking spots per square foot in the house. You should have so many water bottles per square foot in a quasi-commercial school, whatever building there is. And there could be deviations. I don't know. I'm just talking. Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is very specifically defined. I actually have that document in front of me, but right now I had it open and I don't know. I don't think I can share it though. But it is very specifically defined, and it's very specifically defined in the International Plumbing Code, which is adopted in Maryland by regulation. And so it says like, I mean, it's a whole table: theaters and other buildings for the performing arts and motion pictures, drinking fountains, 1 per 500. Nightclubs, bars, taverns, dance halls, and buildings for similar purposes, 1 per 500. Restaurants and banquet halls, 1 per 500, and so on and so forth. And I can send that to you if you'd like, Delegate Morgan. But it is very specifically defined by reference to the International Plumbing Code.
If it's there, I'm cool.
Okay. All right, very good. Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I'm comfortable with it as it is. I think the fact that it only applies where there has to be drinking fountains in the first place answers all of the questions I might have.
Okay. Delegate Guyton. How do you feel? Would you like to?
Oh, thank you.
Bill?
No, you know what? If the committee is ready, I'm happy to move the bill.
Okay, Delegate Love.
I don't know whether we're moving the amendments. I don't think those have been moved yet.
Right.
If they're
You're
sponsor
correct, they
amendments,
haven't
I'll
been moved.
second them or I'll move them or
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, so a second. Okay.
Second the amendments.
All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill as amended.
May I
Move.
please move the bill?
Sure.
Second.
All those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bill passes as amended. Thank you. HB 1055. Kristen, could you discuss where we are with that bill?
Sure, this is dealing with road salt, but I am going to bring up the reprint. So the bill with the sponsor amendments is requiring each state agency, county, municipality to maintain records of each highway salt application made for the winter weather season and submit by July 1 each year, report to the Department of the Environment on the jurisdiction's annual highway salt application for the previous fiscal year, including the total amount of salt applied and the amount of salt the jurisdiction had at the beginning of the fiscal year. Language requiring jurisdictions to include salt applied at schools, including institutions of higher education, public parks, and by private contractors is being stricken by the sponsors' amendments. The Department of the Environment does have, and the fiscal note indicates the Department of the Environment would have a fiscal note around $125,000 to develop the database to receive this type of information.
Okay, Kristen, do these amendments affect the fiscal notes, or maybe I could ask Les or someone else from
I think
MD?
they would still need to establish a database, maybe, but obviously I would defer to MDE to speak to that.
This one's mine. So
Okay.
I think the amendments would actually address our concern of having to do a database, just because it's more narrowly focused, and also it's not as many entities included as previously considered.
So you're saying it would eliminate the need to do the database?
Right, because it's more narrow compared to the original language.
Okay, all right, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a weird question. This says the amendments say added that the jurisdiction needs to report the amount of salt it had at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then it also still requires the total amount of salt applied. Are there any circumstances where those two things may not correlate? In other words, so I have salt at the beginning of the fiscal year, I put a certain amount on my roads, but I might, for example, I don't know, give some to another jurisdiction that ran out. I'm just not sure what the idea of having reporting the amount of salt at the beginning of the fiscal year, what that has to do. That may not necessarily correlate with the amount of salt used. I'm not sure why that's required.
Okay, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you so much. I just had a question because I'm on the bill. I think the bill's great. Is this the same bill we passed? Well, we heard last year, passed this last year, but it seems to be even more narrow in scope.
I don't think we passed a bill last year, but they're not the same. There was a reporting bill that came through last year.
There was a salt regulation bill last year
Yeah.
by Lily C.
You know,
That was
I
different. Yeah.
recall that, but I at my hand, I do not have the details on that.
Okay. Okay. All right. This seems to be very narrow in scope. And I'm fine with that. I just wanted to see how it interacted, what the nexus was with that bill. If we decide to move that tonight, I'm happy to do so with the amendments. So just let you know.
Okay, Delegate Terraza.
Yeah, never mind. I'm good with how it is.
Okay, all right, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fine with it as well. I was just looking to try to understand the reason why, the question that was asked, why reporting what was at the beginning of the fiscal year. I think this is because it's replacing, the more precise application of reporting of per lane mile. I think the idea is to kind of get a general idea of how much was used compared to how much was ordered.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to be clear, like I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, but I just want to be clear that the fiscal note has in fact gone away because it's $125,000. And, I thought we were like not doing anything over like 50,000 or something. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear that it goes away. I'm not sure that Gabrielle was that sure about that.
Well, I can definitely confirm with with the team and give back, but I think just looking at the language, and we spoke with the delegate's office on this, it does significantly narrow it just because of, we wouldn't have to do the private contracting and the schools and so forth. So that just being able to condense that information would be a lot for the department to uptake and be able to store. So that was what the original thinking for having that database, especially if more of these, more is going to be added in the future. It's good to kind of have that base. But I can definitely get back to the group about, what that fiscal note. Frankly, when we looked at the new language, we thought it would be addressed just because it would just be coming from the different counties and municipalities. But I can confirm with our folks.
Okay. Listen,
Okay,
I know, Delegate Love, you have your hand. I'll get to you in 1 second. Let's hold this bill so that Gabby can confirm any change in the fiscal note, and also so we could get an answer to the question that, just confirm the rationale for that one particular reporting requirement that Delegate Foley raised. So, but Delegate Love.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to answer the question that came up earlier. A couple years ago, Delegate Chi had a bill to require MDE to set up a certification program for those who apply salt. We didn't actually pass that, but it's my understanding that MDE has either already done that or they're working on it. So this is just sort of the next step of the process to find out how much of this stuff is out there. And then I was going to move the amendments, but I'll wait.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate. I think just so we can confirm on the fiscal note, just to be sure, we get confirmation, then we can, move the bill next week. Okay, so that wraps things up. Just to confirm, we pass as amended HB 245. Continue, the HB 305 is still on a hold as 655. Passed 841 and with amendments and are holding 1055. So with that, I think we're good. I think we finished in under an hour by 1 minute. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And see you next week.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, bye-bye.